The Locked On Podcast Network presents The Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
New York Giants training camp day 1 is in the books.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast.
The headline story of the day, if you will, was that head coach Brian Daboll was asked if there was going to be a competition for the starting quarterback job, or is it Russell Wilson's job? Now, I don't know why people continued to insist that there was going to be a competition, that Jackson Dart, the first round draft pick, that he would start maybe as early as week 1. I really don't know what was driving those opinions, but for the umpteenth time, Daboll came out and he said, Russell Wilson is the starter. Okay. No surprise there. The Giants need to win. They need to show progress. They're going to go with a guy who has made 10 Pro Bowls and won a Super Bowl to get to that point. And I've said this before, the Giants regime of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, they're in year 4. They're not in year 1 to where they can afford to throw caution to the wind and put a rookie quarterback out there. It's just not going to happen. Not to mention Jackson Dart, as I will get into a little later on in the program, still has some things he needs to smooth out in his game. Okay. Now, what Daboll did leave the door open for, and this, again, is something that would not surprise me. It's something I've talked about on the show. He left it open to where possibly, Jackson Dart could overtake Jameis Winston for quarterback 2 on the depth chart. Now, folks, I've been saying this, for quite some time. What I've said is that I think to start the season, Dart will be quarterback 3. But as he continues to smooth out the rough parts of his game and show that he can be, counted on if he has to go in there, he will at some point this season overtake Jameis Winston for quarterback 2. Okay. It only makes sense if you think about it. If Jackson Dart is going to be quarterback 3, that means he's going to be the emergency quarterback, which also means that he's not getting in any live reps once the season starts. All right. And eventually you want to get that kid live reps, whether it's, in a mop-up role, whether it's, I don't know, plays a final series or whatever the case may be. You ultimately want to get him some reps. It's the same thing they did with Eli. So for the life of me, I don't know why people continue to insist that there was a possibility that Dart might overtake Russell Wilson as the starter. That's not how they set up this quarterback room. Brian Daboll confirming that was going to be the case, that Russell Wilson's the starter, but leaving the door open for the possibility of Jackson Dart maybe overtaking Jameis Winston. Now, later on, I'm going to go into more of my camp observations. But since I'm talking about the quarterbacks, let me just tell you what I saw from the quarterbacks. All right. Russell Wilson got the bulk of the first team reps. They did sneak Dart in there for one of the reps, all right, with the first team. But for the most part, Dart and Winston were alternating for the second team reps, all right, which is the battle that I think Daboll was kind of alluding to when he said they're going to compete. Dart, on his very first throw, he tried to fit the ball into a tight window, did not see defender Nick Jones coming up and jumping the route, and Nick Jones picked it off and returned it for a touchdown. So it was not a good start for Jackson Dart. That being said, he bounced back from that. He had some good throws, but, just in watching him, some of his throws, to my eyes at any rate, looked like they were just a smidge late. Like, he was still trying to read what was being thrown at him. And I've said on this show before, I've said that Brian Daboll is going to throw everything at that kid when he takes his reps. That means complex defenses, stunts, twists, disguise coverage, all of that stuff is going to be thrown at him just to see how he does. And the fewer mistakes he makes, as they go along and as he sees more of this stuff, then the more likely he is going to be ready to take the next step, if you will, in his development. So again, just not a surprise here with Jackson Dart, not being in a competition with Russell Wilson for quarterback one. Quarterback two makes too much sense. And, while I'm on this topic of quarterbacks, Wilson had a pretty good day. I think he threw 4 touchdown passes. 3 of them, I believe, went to Malik Neighbors. So yeah, Wilson looked like he was building that rapport with Neighbors. He looked pretty good, all things considered. Now, the Giants today did a lot of red zone work. Matter of fact, I should say they exclusively worked in the red zone. So you're not talking like any deep passes or anything, too funky, because the red zone offense is a little different than, the offense that they might run at midfield. But Russell Wilson seemed to be in sync with his receivers. All right. Had a good day. Jameis Winston, I thought, he didn't have a bad day, but he did a lot more running, I thought. At least according to my unofficial stats, Jameis Winston did more running, design runs. At one point, he ran the ball 3 times in a row during team drills. And then Dart, like I said, Dart got his chances, had some good throws, had some not so good throws, had some throws where he was late. And, the kid's got a long way to go. He'll get there, but he's not going to be ready to be the starter for week 1. So good decision there, I think, by head coach Brian Daboll to kind of put that to rest. Neighbors was actually one of the stars, I thought, of this first day of camp. Neighbors, good job catching the ball. It looks like he had that chemistry built up with Russell Wilson. And the important thing is that Malik Neighbors was out there after missing the entire spring as a precautionary because of that ongoing toe issue that Brian Daboll said in the spring actually dates back to Malik Neighbors' days at LSU. So when Malik Neighbors spoke to the media after practice, he said something kind of interesting. And, I don't want to be an alarmist. I really don't. But let me tell you what he said and why I'm just a little bit concerned with what he had to say. So he was talking about being back out there, how he was feeling good, how, it was great to be out there with his guys again, how he felt that the injury rehab plan that the trainers and medical staff put together for him was working well. But the topic of surgery came up with Malik Neighbors. He was asked if surgery was ever considered. Might it be an option, or might his toe issue just resolve itself on its own? Malik didn't know if it would resolve itself on its own, but he also said that that surgery had come up in the discussion, and he opted not to have surgery. Now, I don't blame him. I don't know anybody who's going to rush to have surgery if rest and management is going to help. But the takeaway I got, 2 things actually. Number one, Malik Neighbors is going to have his practice reps managed. Now, that shouldn't be that big of a deal because he's pretty good. The only way I could see it being a problem is if the dropsy issue that he had last year continues. And even that is not, a big thing to get all worked up about or upset about. What I'm concerned, though, is that as the year goes on, Malik Neighbors is a guy you want on the field every possible chance you get. All right. So his foot's going to take a pounding, which means they're going to have to manage his practice reps. His foot's going to take a pounding. All right. He is going to end up on that injury report at some point with that toe thing. And if you've got an ongoing issue, probably something at some point he might need surgery on. I hope he doesn't. But just having asked around if that's something that will resolve itself, a lot of medical people that I've spoken with say it can, depending on the severity. And if it was severe enough to hold them out of practice, then, maybe it's something that they're concerned about. And the whole idea was to keep them out there and keep them fresh. So what I'm getting at is the last thing I think any of us want to see is Malik Neighbors ending up to where now he's on the injury report. Now he has to be limited in practice, and it starts to affect his game. Now, it didn't really affect him last year, but if something just continues to get worse and worse and worse, which hopefully his won't, then you've got to ask yourself the tough questions and say, look, do we need to have surgical intervention to finally get rid of this once and for all? So again, let's hope that it doesn't come to that. But I'm not going to lie to you folks, when there's an ongoing issue and it keeps popping up, and again, Dable said back in the spring that it first popped up in college for neighbors, and then it popped up last year. And then, they were concerned enough about it to have it pop up again this year. You got to keep an eye on that. But I don't have to tell you guys and gals that Malik Neighbors is probably one of the most indispensable players on the offense. They need him out there. So if managing the issue is going to get him through the season, so be it. And then he can decide, if it really bothers him, he could decide, okay, maybe after the season's over, I get the surgery. Or maybe he just figures, okay, I'll just rest it and continue to rest it and continue to rehab it so that it doesn't become a long-term issue. But it's just something to keep an eye on, because, with a receiver, obviously you don't want to see them have to take or have to deal with surgery, particularly, on their feet, because, that's a big part of their game. It's not to say that Malik Neighbors couldn't come back from surgery if he had to have it, but I don't think any of us want to see that happen. I know I don't. I'm pretty sure he doesn't. I'm pretty sure the Giants don't. So that's just something to kind of keep an eye on, I think, with Malik Neighbors. Now, since we're talking about him, what did I see from him in camp? I mentioned how he seemed to be in tune with Russell Wilson. But what I really, really like about Malik Neighbors, and we saw this in this game last year, we also saw it today in training camp, that young man, he wants the ball. Okay, so if you put the ball in his direction, and he's got a couple defenders on him, which a couple times he did, he is going to fight you tooth and nail to get that ball. And he will not be denied, right? You just got to love his tenacity. You just got to love his determination to come down with the ball. And again, they only did red zone work today. The deeper stuff is going to come later on in the camp. And that's when you're really going to see some more of the contested catches, or contested catch opportunities and whatnot. But Malik Neighbors, he was just, for a guy that didn't practice all spring, he looked like he was in midseason form. So hopefully, like I said, they keep him on the field, and he's just going to keep getting better and better and better and be such a key part of that offense that, I'm just so looking forward to what he brings to the table.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. I just got a great deal on Chris Stapleton tickets, kind of last minute. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Gametime Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay, no hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and then use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
What James Franklin just revealed about Drew Aller is going to have a major impact on how the quarterback plays. James Franklin revealed something worth noting about Drew Aller that's going to impact this offense in a strong way. It's going to make this offense even better with Andy Kotelnicki at the helm for the second year in a row. We're also going to talk about Penn State getting fantastic news, sharing fantastic news on the NIL front, plus some other takeaways about Big Ten Media Day with Penn State's appearance that you do not want to miss out on towards the end of the show, starting with Drew Aller. So let's set things up here. James goes on Colin Cowherd's show, and Colin's asking him about Drew, and he says he that he's a number one overall pick, or at least has the potential to be in a future NFL draft, and laid out all these different skills that he likes about him, and just asked James, what is something that really makes Drew a strong quarterback, or how he's improved going into this season? And James said, well, he's dropped 10 pounds and he's much more athletic. That is huge for Penn State, because we saw it a little bit last year, how Aller wasn't a dual threat, but he could use his legs. He could maneuver. He was not afraid to run the football more. That first year starting, more that statue-esque quarterback. And James Franklin pointed that out. Quarterbacks in this day and age have to have an element of mobility. I said that years ago. When Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin III went into the NFL, I said, I don't know that you're going to have the Tom Bradys, the Peyton Mannings, the Drew Breeses playing quarterback for much longer, having that be the type of QB that you can build your team around. So how do you adapt your game? If you're Aller, you lose the weight and you become more of a dual threat. Is he Lamar Jackson? No, that's something that James Franklin has kind of always prefaced when having these conversations about Aller. But losing that weight means that Aller does become more of a serious dual threat, that you are going to have to respect his legs, that this is another wrinkle that you can put into Andy Kotelnicki's system, in addition to throwing the ball to a variety of different wide receivers in Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross. Three tight ends that you can rely on between Luke Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins, Andrew Rapplier. You're going to have Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen involved in the passing game. But now the running game gets a little even more complex. Imagine a situation where Aller, the defensive end, has to stay poised, disciplined, because Aller might run the ball for 15 to 20 yards. And you're not expecting it, because you got to account for Singleton and Allen. So to me, Aller going from close to 245 pounds down to 235, as James had said, that is a big deal, because it opens up another part of the playbook for Penn State. It makes this offense even more difficult to stop. It forces defenses to respect Drew Aller in another way, which opens up it's going to open up other areas of the playbook, just because Drew Aller does lose 5 to 10 pounds here. He's down to 235. James Franklin's on the record for that. So he will be faster. He will be quicker. He's not going to be Lamar Jackson. He's not going to be, I mentioned Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck was fairly quick for a mobile quarterback. He wasn't the fastest, but Drew Aller does not need to have that degree of athleticism to be effective as a runner. And Aller showed in the past that he's not really that statue that some people make him out to be, that he can't move, he can't maneuver. That's just not true. It's not true in the slightest. Even his first year starting, you look back at the film, you watch those games, you watch the tape. Aller is extremely difficult to bring down within the pocket. That's one of Aller's better skills, is being able to maneuver, avoid pass rushers. So if you give him an extra gear on his straight line speed, it just makes him an all-around better quarterback. And as James Franklin admitted, you need that in this day and age of football. It's not just about college football. It's not just about pro football. It is across the board, where your quarterback needs to be able to pick up, honestly, even more than just 5 yards, where you kind of have to get into somewhat of a foot race. Aller's not going to be the fastest player on the football field at any given time, but he's certainly someone you're going to have to account for with everything that I just laid out here. And again, this is year 2 of Andy Kotelnicki's offense, meaning that Kotelnicki understands Aller's strengths much better, and the weaknesses too. Aller's not a perfect quarterback. He has weaknesses, but Kotelnicki now understands how to maximize Aller in this offense and to get the football to the best players in any given situation. And you have that with this trio of veteran wide receivers. I think something else that James Franklin pointed out, because we're on this topic of how this benefits Aller, is Trevor Pena was a captain at Syracuse. Kyron Hudson was a captain at USC. Devontae Ross has played a ton of college football as well. Okay, well, it was at Troy. It's group of 5. Okay, he's still a veteran senior wide receiver. He understands the game. Those guys are self-sustainable. They don't need all of this attention. They don't need to be walked through when it comes to everything. Meaning that this is going to be a seamless connection between Aller. Again, are there going to be bumps along the way? Are there going to be hiccups? Do you need to build that chemistry early on? Yes, I still stand by that. It's going to be simpler, though, because of what Pena and Hudson and Ross bring in terms of experience. There's not going to be this long extended period trying to build this chemistry, build this rapport. So Aller is going to take another step forward. If you didn't think he had a breakout season a year ago, that's fine. Then this year you can classify his senior season as that true breakout season, if you will. I thought last year's season was the breakout season for him. Much better. Completion percentage was better. Was a lot more efficient. Did he have his best performances in those big games? No. That's where it can be different this year. Take another step forward. He'll have better stats than from a season ago. So just when we got to thinking that, oh, Aller might not have as much of that dual threat capability, well, James Franklin says otherwise. Franklin says that he is alluding to the fact that he will be utilized more as a dual threat option in the offense, and it makes the team better because of it.
SMU had its day at ACC Media Day yesterday.
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's start with the quarterback, Kevin Jennings, because if you weren't confident in the projected progression of Kevin Jennings before you hear what he said at ACC Media Day, what I'm about to tell you is going to make you a lot more confident in the quarterback. Now, there's a lot going in the right direction for Kevin Jennings. First full year as a starter, second year in the system. He's got continuity with his offensive coordinator, who they were able to retain after a big year, a big surprising year from SMU in 2024. And he obviously will be another year more mature. So we already have those intangibles working in SMU's favor. We also have the tangible things, the arm strength, the athleticism, the mobility. We know all of that, the strength. And that's only going to get better because he's at the age where those sorts of things continue to increase as you continue to work out and get older. But what do we know about what's upstairs with Kevin Jennings? And I think that's what he shed a light on a lot during his time to speak at ACC Media Day. So let's go ahead and we're going to get right into the content because there was a lot that he said that I thought was highly, highly impressive. So the first thing that caught my eye was he was asked the question, you obviously had a fantastic season last year, but struggled against Penn State on the road in the college football playoff. What can you take away about handling that hostile environment, and how will you put that into action when you all go to Clemson this season? Honestly, I think it's a great question. Kevin Jennings, short and sweet. His answer was shorter than the question. Quote, I took a lot from that game. I tell myself all the time, I needed that game. I needed a bad game like that to bounce back and come back in and remind myself that I can play at this level. I can do all the things I'm capable of doing. Just taking that game and going to the Clemson game is going to be kind of the same environment, just looking forward to heading to Clemson. Now, I'm going to tell you a couple of things that are going to be different between going to Happy Valley and going to Clemson. Number one, it's not going to be 10 degrees. I think that plays into SMU's advantage right there. The fact that you're not going to be having to figure out how to avoid frostbite. Number two, Clemson's a hell of an environment. Clemson is a raucous environment with a great atmosphere and an electric fan base. It is not Happy Valley. I don't know if y'all seen Happy Valley. Happy Valley, especially during a whiteout game, boy, that is an intimidating place to play. And that's not to say that Clemson isn't, but there's levels to this. We rank things all the time. And Penn State is a little bit above Clemson. So I love that they got the weather, they got the environment, and it's going to be a little bit of a tone down on both of those fronts when SMU goes to Clemson. Now for the real part. Kevin Jennings sucked in that playoff game. He did. Point blank, end of story. He was bad. And the entire offense was bad. To the surprise of Probably no one. The offensive line couldn't hold up against a Penn State team that is known for a front seven, and their front seven did not disappoint in that game. SMU looked like a team that, quite frankly, and I think all of us can probably agree with this, was a year ahead of schedule. And eventually the teams that are a year ahead of schedule, that comes to roost at some point. Cool, got it. But being in that environment and having that sort of experience can only help you psychologically going forward. We talk about this in professional leagues all the time. You got to knock at the door and knock at the door and knock out the door until you finally get there. Think of like what the Boston Celtics did all those years running into LeBron before ultimately they make it through and win a championship a couple of years ago. This is a very common theme that happens in sports. And you just continue to build on it and build on it and build on it. So I love that KJ right now is like, hey, we're just gonna build on this. This next question is one that I have harped on a ton ever since we started this podcast. The question was essentially, with all the change going on in college football, you came back and now you're with the staff for another year. How is that continuity going to help you? Kevin Jennings says, quote, "It definitely helped me a lot just coming in the building. I've got the same coach, same offense, just things like that. Not me having to think too much of stuff I've got to remember. I've got to learn this and all that stuff. It's really a big help having a great coaching staff around me. They coach me each day and every day to get better and just trying to uplift that trust," end quote. Now, there is another answer to another question that I want to piggyback that off of. You were able to do a little bit of everything in the air, on the ground, but heading into the 2025 season, what have you been the most focused on improving in your overall game as a leader, etc.? What are you most excited to showcase in the upcoming season? KJ says, quote, "The things I've been working on, just working on the little things, taking that very seriously, being a better leader, being a more vocal leader at that, and also, and this is one that I've harped on, just decision making. That kind of cost me a little bit last year." Does it not start to seem that things are really coming together for Kevin Jennings? Because he's now in an offense he's comfortable with. He's learning nothing new. He's just building upon what he was incrementally trying to learn from last year. And the one word I take away from those two quotes I just gave from Kevin Jennings is command. He didn't say the word. But if you add up all the pieces of what he just said, being more vocal, being more of a leader, decision-making, comfort in the offense, if you add all of those things up and you try to sum all of that up in one word, it's command. He's going to have a better command of that huddle. He's going to have a better command of that offense. He's going to have a better command of this team. And the vibe is going to follow. Everything that I've been talking about the last couple of weeks that I've been looking out of Kevin Jennings and what you're going to look for out of KJ to display in the 2025 season, he just said that in 3 sentences. He basically just said, I've got better command of the situation around me. And that's what you're hoping for with a guy who was inserted during the season last year, showed some really good flashes of what he could be in a situation just like what's going to be the case in 2025. And he has taken that off season and done exactly that. He's going to be a better leader. He's going to be more vocal because he's going to be more comfortable. You can't lead people in a situation that you're new in and haven't gotten your feet grounded in. But now he has. And the next step is to be that vocal leader. And I would expect a lot of really big things out of Kevin Jennings this year because he's got the talent. I think he's got the right stuff upstairs, and he's going to marry all of that with further command of his situation and of the offense. And that, combined with what SMU's got around him, defense still going to be pretty good. I like SMU this year. Just based off what I hear I like it. I like it. I like what I hear from Kevin Jennings. And I think this team's going to be really good. And they've got a chance to do something special. Even in Clemson, by the way.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Dan Lanning takes the stage at Big Ten Media Days.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks.
Dan Lanning took the stage. Nothing super, flashy show. He was very solid across the board. Double down, I think, is the phrase that came out, standing out the most from what Dan Lanning said earlier today here in Las Vegas. In addition to the funniest moment of the entire week for really any...
The one-worder?
Yeah, the one-worder. Someone asked him whether tampering needs to be cracked down upon in college football. And I think this gentleman was perhaps new to interviewing Dan Lanning.
Wisconsin. He probably doesn't get a lot of opportunity.
Probably doesn't get a lot of chances. Dan Lanning said, yeah. That was it. And then a silence and laughter.
And then a follow-up.
Yeah.
And then he touched on what we all believe, which is, you should play by the rules if there are rules.
Yeah.
Which was fair.
I just that was honestly the moment that kind of stood out the most. What did you make of Dan Lanning's
just to
comments?
touch on the double down thing, which was, to me, I'm trying to think of other things, and there are probably a couple we can touch on. And I had a one-on-one with him earlier. We'll both talk with him in a little bit in a scrum setting. But he's good with these taglines. Like, that's always, I think, been a strength. And he noted you're in Las Vegas. Like, I don't know if that had much to do with the origin story of coming up with this one, but he mentioned it. I mean, we're in Vegas, got to double down. I saw you doing a little bit of that last night on the tables, unsuccessfully for the most part.
Well, it depends. So it depended on the time of the night.
The time of the night I was there was a little earlier.
That wasn't a good time.
best.
Eric is a bad luck charm. Just everybody get that on file.
I called the blackjack.
Okay, that's true. That's very true.
It was pretty good.
That's very true.
But no, I think for this program, that's what this is. This is year 2 in the Big Ten. Last year went literally as good as it could until it went horrific. But in terms of just Big Ten counting football games, they won all of them.
Yeah.
We're at the Big Ten Media Day. This was the top program, and this is your opportunity to prove. I don't think anyone's saying it or really believes it, but last year was legitimate. There's no fluke involved, and they can do it again. And I think based upon conversations I've had down here, we've probably had as well with some other Big Ten media folks, and the fact that they're picked third behind Penn State, who has got one of the most talented rosters in the country, and Ohio State, the reigning national championship. I think everybody looks around and says Oregon feels like a reasonable bet to double down on.
Yeah, I think so. And the interesting thing about Oregon coming into this season is that game on January 1st. I think for a lot of people, frankly myself included, wiped out how great 13-0 was. Yeah. I mean, it made it not just that it was a loss, but because it was such a. And Dan Lanning touched on it in his remarks, saying he needed to be better. They didn't play the way that they were capable of. What you'd expect and want a head coach to say in that particular spot, but it's just, I think, easy to forget because Oregon fans have been chasing that one thing every year. I think there are a lot of Oregon fans that are in that mindset of, every year is national title or bust. We won a Big Ten championship. And it's kind of who cares? That's not what we're going for. Oregon fans have seen conference championships many times over the last several years. And not that it isn't good, but it's not what they're looking for.
No, and especially last year where it felt so attainable.
Yes.
It felt so attainable. It felt reasonable to expect. And then for it to end the way it did, I talked to Bryce Betcher, who's doing a podcast right over here about it, and he didn't really mince the words of that put a real sour taste on the mouth. And the other part is I asked him, and I tried to ask Dan, he wasn't super willing to play ball. He kind of talked in the same terms that we said in the press conference.
Shocker.
This is a new season. What happened last year doesn't matter. But the point Bryce made was, of course this is going to stick in everybody's craw. And that's true also on a roster where you look around and it's I don't know a lot of these guys. These guys weren't here for last year, right? that's the other interesting part about this is we return 4 starters now that Evan Stewart is not going to be a part of this for at least the first portion of the year. Dan, I asked him specifically about that, to stick on Evan for a second, and he said we're not ruling anything out, but certainly didn't indicate like it's a sure thing he plays it all this season. So you got 4 guys basically who started last year who are back. A bunch of newcomers, a lot of excitement, but even Bryce was like, the transfers came in and they could feel it. Like the newcomers came in, they could feel it. Like this was a tough way to end a season, and it's not like something they're going to run away from. It's not going to be at the forefront. Dan at least has made that the public-facing point of view, but I'm sure that just like the fans, like these guys really wanted to win that game, and they're really embarrassed by what happened, and Bryce said as much. Yeah,
and the other thing that stood out is of the players that are here at Media Days this week, Kenyon Sadiq, Bryce Betcher, and Mateo Uyunglele. Kenyon got mentioned first. I caught up with him, and I'll have that audio later on today's show, and you can hear his thoughts on the season and all that sort of stuff. But I don't think it's a coincidence that, especially in light of the Evan Stewart injury, of the players that Lanning brings, 2 defensive guys, but he goes to the offensive guy first. Kenyon Sadiq is generating real serious buzz. Tomorrow on the show, I'll have Jake Butt of the Big Ten Network, a former Mackey Award winner, who is all in on the hype train.
The right person to talk to
about
it.
Yes, absolutely. But it's not just limited to Dan Lanning or you or like. Yeah. You have Kenyon Sadiq before he's even had a 500-yard season.
He's had a 300-yard season.
I think last year he had 400.
That was what Ferg had, about 475.
Yeah, I might have to double check all that.
I think he was like 240 last year. Well, anyway.
Well, yeah, we could. I'll double check while you answer. Like he has, but the buzz that he's creating is really real, and Dan Lanning's buying into that.
Dan Lanning's buying into it. When I did my my one-on-one with Dan earlier, I think the thing that stands out is, you look at Kenyon, you can point to some of these moments, the hurdle, the record-breaking touchdown for Bo Nix, which again wasn't like a spectacular play, but it was a significant play where he's, what was it?
308 yards.
300. Okay, so just over 3.
Yeah.
But Dan's point was that, like, as much as everybody loves this guy, and I'm curious to see if Jake said anything about this, but as a receiver, as a target, like, he's just as good of a blocker.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that Dan wanted to, I think, I don't know if he mentioned it today up on the stage, but he mentioned it with me, and we talked about that for quite a bit, just the growth he's made as a blocker and how, like, an overall play. This is not just I don't know if this is fair to Brock Bowers necessarily, but when we talk about Brock Bowers, we go, this guy goes out and get like 1,000 yards in the NFL immediately. I don't think you necessarily talk about like he's just eliminating guys like Gronk. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying Kenyon Sadiq is Rob Gronkowski as a blocker, but I'm saying like he's a top tier blocker, and I think that
100%
is going to pay off a lot.
PFF agrees, by the way.
They do. PFF agrees. I agree with PFF.
Yeah,
and everything.
Yeah,
100% accurate. Everything's great.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. I just got a great deal on Chris Stapleton tickets, kind of last minute. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Gametime Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay, no hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and then use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
The Indianapolis Colts quarterback competition kicked off today, and each quarterback put up pretty typical stat lines for what we expected.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast.
The Colts are back on the field. It's just training camp, but look, it's something. It's football, something to get excited about, and we have this quarterback competition front and center. So we're going to talk about the quarterback competition in just a second, but first, to rattle off just some injury updates, the shortest injury list of the offseason upcoming here, where just linebacker Zaire Franklin missed today. Everybody else was a participant. I'm assuming that will change every other day the rest of training camp, but good news on the injury front, Jake, and some guys that we thought could miss some time, from Samson Ebukam, Daniel Scott, Jalen Jones, some guys who missed time in minicamp. All of them were back on the field. Jalen Carlisle was another big one too. So good to hear that they were all back on the field, right, Jake?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So nobody's on PUP, and Franklin was the only one who was out. Sorry, my voice is being weird. There we go. But yeah, we already kind of expected that from him. Missed the first couple days at least while he recovers from that ankle. But yeah, all those guys who missed extended periods of time in the offseason program, all back. You love to see Jalen Carlisle's back, especially if Franklin is going to still be out. There really weren't any new injuries. There was a period of time where Alec Pierce had to get like kind of stretched out on the side, but he came back after. But as is normal, like over these next couple days, there's probably going to be some guys popping up with soft tissue things. Like they're just throwing their bodies back into a position they haven't been in for several weeks. So far so good. It's going to change, but I mean, at least they're going into camp healthy.
Yeah, I can't complain about that whatsoever when it comes to this Colts team. Now let's dive into this quarterback competition, though, because that's going to eat up all the headlines, and it's what you guys want to hear about. So for the first training camp practice of the offseason, it looked like Daniel Jones got the first run with the starters, but it was a fairly even split by everything I saw. But Jake, just dive into it. Give us all the info you can on Richardson versus Daniel Jones in day one of training camp.
Yep, they each got a few sessions with the first team offense during 11-on-11s and 7-on-7s. Obviously, it was Jones up first throughout the spring. It had been Anthony, but that's kind of to be expected. They're working Anthony back in now. Chris Ballard had mentioned yesterday that they're going to watch Anthony's volume as a passer, which just is a fancy term basically for pitch count. But what I like about what they're going to do, Shane Steichen kind of explained today, is you're probably going to notice Anthony throwing a little less, but that's mostly going to be during like positional work where they're just like throwing routes on air and stuff like that, which I think that's smart. That's inconsequential football, but they're still going to give him like the live reps with the teamwork and stuff. So I think that's smart. That way he's not really missing out on anything that Daniel Jones gets to participate in. But yeah, and then each day they're just going to basically rotate. So what we saw today, like everything that Daniel Jones got, Anthony's going to get that, and then vice versa. They did get like even work, but like Anthony's going to go out there first tomorrow, I would assume. So they're just going to keep rotating. I don't know that there's going to be much from us to take away from their split for probably the next week or so.
Yeah, and we'll really tell once the games get going. Yeah. And I think when the last time the Colts had a true quarterback competition was back with Minshew and Richardson, I think it was right after or right before the first preseason game is when we got the announcement on who. I think it might have been right after. So maybe that timeline's a little bit later this offseason with it more of a high octane, I guess, quarterback competition, but we will see there. Now, when it comes to how these guys performed in 11-on-11s, you kept track of the numbers for that. To keep in mind, though, just before I throw it to you for the numbers, let's not overrate completion percentage in 11-on-11s, guys. This is not me trying to be a defender or pro anybody here. This is purely that these numbers get thrown around every offseason for every quarterback, and they do get, just completion percentage alone is not the biggest indicator. But Jake, what were the numbers that you put down for the guys, and what did your eyes tell you, I guess, aside from the numbers?
Yeah, so overall, I think these guys had a relatively even day. The numbers don't indicate it, but like watching it, I did not feel like one guy really separated themselves whatsoever. So now this is just during 11-on-11s. Anthony was 4 of 11. Now, there were at least 3 drops out of that group there. I've got here that, it was Pittman, Taylor, and Ashton Doolin each had drops. There were other instances where the pass defense just did a really good job. Like Charvarius Ward, like dove and stretched in front of Michael Pittman Jr. to break one up. Tyler Warren, had Joe Bocci in between him and the ball, and Bocci made a good play. So, like, the defense made a good play. The route runners were out there not maybe getting the greatest separation in the world. But overall, I think like you see early in training camp pretty much every year, there's timing issues. These guys are not really on the same page yet. There was also like an instance where it looked like Josh Downs cut outside and Anthony thought he was going to go inside, like just little communication things like that really are not a big deal. They're not like indicative of being inaccurate or anything. And then the same thing with Daniel Jones. He was 7 of 8 in 11 on 11, so nearly perfect. But his 7-on-7 sessions were a little rougher than that. Now they were leaning into like runs and RPOs and first and second down stuff, which Daniel should eat that stuff alive. It's like quick decisions, getting rid of the ball, short distances and things, stuff where he's going to really kind of accelerate there. So he looked efficient there in 11 on 11s. But he had a late throw in 7-on-7s to the sideline to Josh Downs, where it just took too long to get there, and Kenny Moore read it the entire way and just jumped in front of it at the sideline and picked it off. There was another one where I think it was Austin Ajake got a hand up, and Daniel had some heat on that one, but Ajake got his hand up and batted it down. So I almost want to throw the numbers out of this one, because when you take 7s and 11s into play here, both guys just had a day. Like, it was the start of training camp, and it felt that way.
Yeah. And so you would say, just from your first day of watching, that both guys were kind of fine, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the way you put it?
Yeah, there was nothing spectacular. Like, Jones did have a really good play where he threw a go ball up the left sideline to Anthony Gould for about 30 yards. That was probably the best offensive play of the day. But then he also was on the wrong end of the best defensive play of the day, where he threw that pick to Kenny, or you could even say Charvarius Ward's play was really good as well. So these guys are they're still developing that timing and rhythm with their pass catchers, because we also, Tyler Warren's going to be a big part of this thing as well, and he hasn't really gotten involved yet. There was that target to him that got broken up with Bocce right in front of him. But things are going to develop, but this very much felt like the first day of camp, where not everyone's really clicking on all cylinders yet.
Yeah, and a relatively short practice as well, right? You said it was only like an hour.
Just an hour, yeah.
Yeah, so we didn't really get a ton. It wasn't a very physical practice, I'm assuming. Did they even have full pads on today?
No, they can't go full pads for I think they have to have at least 3 practices there. So you might be looking at Saturday or Monday or something until they get the pads on.
Okay, cool. So obviously today's practice is certainly something that we put in the data banks, and it's something to evaluate throughout the off season, but it is day one of 3 or 4 weeks of these things that we're going to get here. This will become more identified as we go, but it seems from everything that you've said and everything I've seen from other people, it seems like both these quarterbacks were kind of exactly what we expected out of both of these quarterbacks in day one of training camp, especially considering that they were doing first and second down work today. Jones certainly has the advantage in first and second down work, where Richardson will probably do a little bit better in the third down work that you think is coming tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I think so. They'll probably move into third down work and then red zone stuff the day after.
Yeah. Okay, so Jones might have the advantage in red zone. Jones might have advantage in a lot of training camp stuff because it's really set up for him.
He ate in the red zone during OTAs and minicamp, I will say.
Yeah.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
The Hornets keep giving us content, baby. They signed a new two-way player, Antonio Reeves.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast.
They just keep giving us stuff to talk about. Thank you very much, Jeff Peterson. We appreciate that.
Jeff knows he doesn't have to sign a player every day, right? There's no rule in the CBA that says Jeff Peterson. I feel like he's like me in a lot of ways. When I start a new job, even a year or two in, I'm just like Mr. Overachiever. I have to do everything, and I build that credibility up so that then in year 2 or 3, I can just lean back and they're like, no, Doug is definitely working. He has a reputation of working, but Jeff knows he doesn't have to sign someone every day, right?
Yeah, next offseason, we're not signing anybody. We're going to trade cash considerations for Brad Wanamaker and call it a day. That's what's happening next offseason. But the Hornets sign Antonio Reeves to a 2-way contract. This coming in from Shams Charania, who has had the Hornets news. It's a monopoly now. Woj is out of the game. Shams has had all of it. But he's been tweeting a lot about the Hornets because the Hornets have been making a lot of moves. So the Hornets sign a guard, shocker there. They signed guard Antonio Reeves to a 2-way NBA deal. The 2024 New Orleans Pelicans second-round pick averaged 6.9 points per game and shot 40% from 3 in 44 games as a rookie last season. Doug, this is not your typical 2-way contract player, in my opinion. A lot of people liked him coming out of Kentucky last season. Again, he falls to the second round where he's selected by the Pelicans. If you look at his game log, if you look at what he did last year, it's a pretty interesting game log. And you know me, I love a good game log, buddy. I do. Oh, my God, they're great. So, like, getting spot minutes here and there, not playing a whole lot. Like, the most he played was 18 at the beginning of the season, but then 8 DNP CDs. Boom! 39 minutes. There's a game with 39. He scores 34 points. That would be a season and, of course, career high. He puts up 25 shots. He puts up 12 threes. He actually makes 14 of those 25 shots and goes for 34. Okay, they also get beat by almost 30 in that game playing Cleveland. So then the very next game, he plays 12 minutes. The game after that, it's a DNP. Okay, so all right, so spot minutes. Then Pelicans are out of the playoffs. Let the young boys play. Let the kids play. Now it's all about some April basketball, baby. And that's where Antonio Reeves actually puts together a nice little run from mid-March to the end of the season. Shot 45% from 3 in that stretch in the 16 games that he played. Okay, I'll take 45% from 3 no matter how you slice it. Averaged, I think, I'm looking at the points per game average here, around like 15 or so. Like he was putting up a decent amount of points every single game. So yeah, man, like a lot of people like Antonio Reeves, just a dead-eye shooter is what he really is on this team.
That's it. I mean, that's I think what they've been looking for all offseason is to add shooting to this roster with players that have the size and potential and sort of character and effort that the team is looking for, that they can say, we may be able to mold this player into a passable defender and dead-eye shooter, which, like, if you look at the Boston Celtics team that won the championship, they were full of those guys. The guys that Charles Lee was helping to assistant coach every day, they were full of Sam Hausers and Sam Merrills and, just Sam shoot a bunch of threes. And you look at other guys in this mold, kind of like a Max Strus for Cleveland and for Miami before that. Caleb Martin, Miami turned, again, it's about turning like liability on defense to passable defense, and then at the same time, you're getting awesome offense. When I watch, I did a little bit of tape study this morning, and when I watch Antonio Reeves, I see a player who's a great shooter, also plays a little bit under control. If he has to go to his dribble and get to the mid-range, he can play in control. It's not always extremely effective there. He cannot get to the rim. He's not going to do that for you, but he can play a little bit inside the arc. And then defensively, yeah, he just needs a lot of work, and that's where Greensboro Swarm going to come in. It's the same thing with like Drew Peterson and KJ Simpson and a lot of these players. Like, I'm excited about what they can bring to the training camp squad, to the preseason, but if they're playing minutes for the Hornets next season, something has gone terribly wrong, and you bring up the New Orleans game log. That's what happened in New Orleans. They are a cursed franchise, thanks to George Shin and breaking my heart as a 10-year-old. I put a voodoo curse on them, and they have not been able to get out of it yet, and they were terribly injured. They have been for the past couple of seasons, and that's given players like Antonio Reeves, who was drafted, I think, 47th overall, an opportunity to play. That should sound very familiar to people who listen to this show. So why did New Orleans suddenly give up on him? Because they waived him entirely, and the answer is they just flipped their entire front office. So Joe Dumars comes in, and Dumars didn't draft this guy, and this happened. I feel like this happened to Amari Bailey with the Hornets. Like, wasn't and I may have the timing wrong on that. But it's like this happens a lot where new regime comes in. I didn't draft you. I don't want to play with you anymore. I want to play with my own guys. And so that's what happens to Reeves. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. And now the Hornets will get an opportunity to see if they can turn him into something.
Yeah, maybe like a Troy Daniels. Can we get another miracle after midnight?
Troy Daniels!
Does he fit that profile? So I mentioned
Yeah,
an interesting game
sure.
log from Antonio Reeves. Also an interesting cleaning the glass page. If you go to shooting accuracy, he's in the 5th percentile shooting at the rim. Not good. He's in the 91st percentile in the short mid-range. So
there you go.
short mid-range, 91st percentile, I'll take that. How about the 100th percentile? That's pretty solid from non-corner threes. So when it came to shooting non-corner threes, Antonio Reeves, according to Cleaning the Glass, was the best shooter in the NBA last year.
Sick.
This is what we're talking about. Like, usually that's a guy, even with how bad they might be defensively, and even if they can't do a lot of other things, just run them off of some screens and hope to God that the other team misses some buckets on the other end. That's a skill that'll keep you in the league for a little while. Anthony Morrow type, Troy Daniels type, will just somehow, some way, will just keep you in the league for a little while.
Okay, I really have a lot of strangely have a lot of thoughts about this.
Well, this is not your typical two-way guy. Like, that's the thing. People are kind of excited. And Damian Baugh, we can, salute. Maybe we can do the eulogy Damian Baugh stuff. Yeah, there's some interesting stuff there, but hey, this is an interesting player to discuss.
It is, and I think it has implications even beyond this season and even beyond Antonio Reeves. Just the idea of adding a player like Reeves, I want to talk about. There's a big deal here, I think. There's a big deal here that I want to get to in a second. But I also have to get to this very quickly. They don't make many Antonios anymore in the NBA. I feel like Antonios were very prevalent. They were the Jalens of the 1990s. There were a lot of Antonios in the 1990s. We don't make many Antonios anymore. I like that. The Hornets getting back to taking Kentucky guys. That's a Michael Jordan special. Michael Jordan, Mitch Kupchak special. So getting back.
We see
to
you, Mitch.
Kentucky
Still
guys.
working. Yeah, Mitch is still working.
You had something on Antonios, I think.
Antonio Davis. Oh,
sure.
Man, love me some Davis. Part of the Davis brothers, was an all-star, I think, with the Raptors. Antonio Daniels. Sorry, he got crossed up by AI, but Antonio Daniels is another one. Antonios, bring him back. That's what the Hornets are doing.